Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you live around the world. This video well, for me at least, it's an interesting approach or idea, one that has been worked upon for many times by many other people, but in my endeavours I thought, maybe a bit of a hybrid approach to making a dome rather than being a purist, which I sometimes have got a little bit of a trait to try and be, and to little end benefit. So the title of this file that we're looking at, the SketchUp drawing, is a look at and effectively a hybrid approach. And I refer to making these panels because in my efforts to develop the processes to create this dome, and I'd made a video touching on this when I was saying I made a grandiose statement and my ego may have been at play there, I then proceeded to try and make the model work as if I was building it out in my workshop. And believe it or not, I had more problems. So some of the types of domes that are made have probably had the same issues, and what we see at the end is that compromise or that decision to go a certain way. And I specifically are talking about the type of dome that starts out with perhaps a solid piece of timber, and they are cut in half along their length at a particular angle that, once assembled in a triangle, would create the dihedral angles. That may well be something I wind up reverting to even for this project here. However, I do prefer this particular type of dome, the style, the look, for me. Anyway, when I was making the comments about the dihedral angles between these two, the blue and the purple surfaces or the triangles, it is quite flat. But I was using that as a lead-in to say, oh yes, but it gets worse. And it was this red box, that those two triangles were so relatively flat that they were effectively, truly flat. And then I resized everything to the size I wanted, and it's 6 meters across the legs here, the tips. And I re-examined that, and the difference, if we were to have a look at the fillet between the two panels, like this one here, but for these two triangles, that distance was only 1.4 millimeters. It was 0.8 of a degree difference between the two panels to create the dihedral surfaces, the angles. And I thought, the more I thought about it, I thought, there's no way in the world I can possibly get these two panels machined accurately enough to generate it, and to what benefit. Am I doing it simply because it is a dome and those two panels should be separate? Well, yes, I was. That's exactly why I was doing it. But the more I did it, I kept on coming back thinking, oh, this is just insanely stupid to try and work out such a tiny, not discrepancy, but issue surrounding the dihedral angles and the measurements and the creation. I even said that perhaps all I do is I take a whisker, a wafer thin shaving off the bottom of the strut on one triangular surface, or the strut, and on the other, and the problem would disappear. Again, to what benefit? So I thought to myself, and I've done that in a different area, what happened if we truly made this a flat panel, so that it is literally a box that I could make up of the required lengths, because it's not square, it's a diamond, and insert it, but still have a strut across here acting as a brace to actually stabilize the structure. And I've put it in place, and I don't know, but I could have the equivalent, that's what I should do actually, I could have the equivalent representation of a framed dome like this, and you would not be able to visually pick up any difference. And remembering this is a reasonable sized dome, it's not huge, but it's certainly not a small dome, and the strut lengths are quite large, and the span of the diamonds are a reasonable area, length. So you should see the graduation of the dihedral angles showing up. But 1.4 millimeter separation between them, or 0.8 of a degree, I don't know. And again, to what benefit? Now, I did this in another video where I created these two triangles as flat. So as was this was flat, and these two were flat. So I actually was trying to only use diamonds, and that was problematic, but certainly possible. And I've seen domes made with it like that, or a structure, a physical dome made, and it just didn't appeal, even though it does have practical, it's practical. So now we're at this stage. Now I'm just going to draw in the other screen, and I'll probably flesh out just for a moment so that you're not listening to my voice all the time, so you can actually see what I'm talking about. And here it is here. Everything's effectively the same. I actually coloured it pretty much in this file, this SketchUp file, and saved it into a new file. But underlying is the structure of a high fidelity version of it, so I knew that I was working with accurate measurements. I was trying to nut through the use of the information you can gain from the honeycomb, and that's when I started seeing these very fine discrepancies. So that's where I was saying it's 0.8 of a degree difference between the dihedral angles, and that started giving me concern. I thought maybe I could make up a jig that, and I could do this, where I could make the fillets rather than having to, in a little jig setup, because I could create the dimensions in SketchUp and utilize them in the workshop without having to make a full panel or triangle to try and achieve that. But then that measurement just was haunting me. So this is it here. This is, I hope, and I've double checked, correctly drawn, where the two triangles are so close, and then you come to try and get that measurement. Well, you're probably going to be lucky to cut the triangles accurately enough even to introduce that consistent the measurement, because really you're not talking about 1.4 mil, you're talking about 0.7 of a mil for each of the two panels combined, making 1.4. So points, that's just insane. I work with the fractions of a millimeter in some cuts that you do, but not when you're actually making something like this, which after all, let's just have a quick peek. It's 2.1 meters long that way. It's 1500. So it's a reasonable sized bit of framing. 1.4 mil, 0.7 on each. Insane. So I thought, well, if I rotate this one up to make it flush or in plane with this triangle, because after all, these are, you could say it's a fixed, it's in a fixed position because it's got these finite points for the triangle, and this one really, you treat it as if it's independent. Lift it up a little bit, which I've done here. So all I did was I lifted the two struts here and made it flush. So now if I sat that on a bench top, all four sides would be sitting on the ground. Put a brace through. Only question there is, do you have a single brace, or do you make a double strut, or do you have a double strut there to make it look similar to the actual dome itself, with the rest of the dome. That may actually occur. It would, because there's so little difference as shown in the other example. Maybe you just wanted to make it look like it. Now, if you wanted to keep the shape, rather than making the two separate triangles at the dihedral angle as appropriate for the dome you're making, maybe you can do this, make a flat box, but on the outside you could build it up a little bit. Maybe it's approximately 6 to 10 millimeters. You could make a fillet, but then to what advantage? I think here it'd be just as easy to leave it as it is, put your triangle in of, in my case it will be plywood, and on both halves to introduce the visual change to that strut line, and I don't think anyone would be the wiser. That's a thought. Just wait there. I just had the thought that I had a photo. Let's just see if I can zoom out so we don't trip over. In fact, I'll go back to the other screen. It was here, and I'll bring in a photo that is very similar to what, if not identical to the as this. It's slightly bigger. Now I'll just zoom in a little bit. Whoops, my apologies for that horrible zoom. But that top surface there is the one I'm talking about. And you can see where their seam for whatever cover material they've used goes along that line. But unless we were there in person and actually could use the accuracy of our eyes, and that's pretty darn flat. This one has got more of a change to it, but even this panel here, in reality, you'd be able to pick up the angle change for the dihedral angles. But in this here, the equivalent, you can see the line, or well, I can at least in the photo. But the difference in this panel it's not a lot. So I was wondering whether there can be a chance of having quite flat panels in general, and you can incline the pieces of ply to create the dome look, from the outside at least, with fillets or tapering fillets. I don't think that's necessary in this kind of case, but this one here, this tealy colour and yellow and gold colour, it's only 6 millimeters. Again, it's a little bit more doable, especially if I use the resin or the auto filler as the separator. But there's a bit of thought. Got a feeling the top in red area might be, and here's the other thing, if you wanted to cover that with a transparent, translucent material, it would be one sheet to cover that area. So you've done away with a joint along there. Not itself a bad thing to do, but one surface. Could have, or you, God, I'm bouncing around a bit now, aren't I? Even if you were to use a material such as a polycarbonate profile type, corrugated or shaped profile, you would be able to easier create a rebate or extend a piece of timber on top around the box, the top two corners at least, and run your profile, your roofing material, down on this direction I'm indicating, and trim it to size, and then flash it off along the 4 edges there, and you've got a reasonably water shedding type covering for that area. Just a thought, rambling a bit, but yeah. Hybrid approach. Flat panel here, make it look like it's two triangles, do away with the hassle of trying to work with those insanely small dihedral angles and measurements. I think that's a step, and I think that is a step forward. Pause for contemplation. I'm going to go with that. I may sidestep now for the future iterations that you'll see any attempt to make the red area truly domed. So that's the other question, I suppose. No, I won't. But strength-wise, stability-wise, would it be better to run the strut this way? Don't know. Okay, that's it. I'll leave you alone and you can get back to your life. Okay, see you now. Bye.